All right, so we are in our final week of February, and we're doing our final session for our growth mindset segment, right? Our growth mindset topic. And today we're going to discuss the role of feedback and building confidence through feedback, specifically communication confidence. So let's go through some strategies and enjoy that. Okay, so we're going to understand the strategic value of feedback, look at some concrete phrases for asking and using feedback. We're going to explore real world examples, and we're going to have a little bit of a challenge as well that you can practice yourself this week, because that's going to help you with, practicing and also getting feedback on feedback, if that makes sense. What is the strategic value of feedback? Well, it's so important because it shows us our strengths and our weaknesses and things that we didn't even realize, right? So our blind spots, things that we weren't even necessarily aware of. It also helps us maintain this growth mindset, because if we look at criticism as opportunities to improve, get better, to grow, then the growth mindset really just gets stronger. So the mantra that I want you to kind of take in is, I value honest insights for progress, right? Again, making the emphasis be progress over something has to be perfect. So with this kind of growth mindset, we want to shift the paradigm. So instead of looking at something from a defensive standpoint and saying, oh, why do they think of me that way? Or I can't believe they thought that, or I can't believe they said that, right? Really making it almost an attack on your character, even if it wasn't. Then you essentially turn it into curiosity. Oh, how can I understand this? How can I, be a better person? How can I be a better communicator? So every opportunity you get for feedback. Okay, so the next thing we want to think about is our other kind of mantra, which is, your feedback is so helpful to me to improve, right? Even if you don't voice this to somebody, just saying that out loud to yourself is going to help you think of feedback in a better way, right? So essentially you are saying, well, you know what? I am going to see feedback as a teachable moment, and I'm going to view it that way. I'm going to have people see that this is how I embrace feedback. And that's also going to help you create a stronger outer shell. So in other words, no matter what anybody says to you or about you, you turn it into a feedback mindset, a curious mindset, and think about, okay, this feedback is going to help me. Ultimately, I'm the one who wins out because I get this great feedback. And even if it's not great feedback, you find a way to make it great. You find a way to make it useful to you, helpful to you, right? If it's something like, somebody makes a comment about maybe you not being strong enough, guess what? That the next day you're hitting the gym, you are getting stronger that next year. And that's the focus, right? The strength that you're building. Okay, so I want you to think about an opportunity for feedback that you've recently had. Thinking about your own kind of opportunity, or rather your own piece of feedback that you've recently received, right? Thinking about, how could you have maybe asked for that feedback? Maybe, sharing a moment where I wasn't clear, or sharing a moment where I could have received the feedback better, or something along those lines. For example, when you are asking for feedback, you want to be super clear, right? You want to say, so what can I do to make sure that I get this feedback? What can I do to make sure I'm understanding the feedback, right? Making sure, in other words, that you are clear. Okay. And then this is also true when you're giving feedback, right? How can I, provide feedback in the most clear way? What kind of information do I need to communicate to make sure this person understands what I'm providing feedback on? Okay. And always when you're giving feedback or you're in a situation where you're receiving feedback, make sure that it's a safe environment, right? Psychological safety is a big one. Okay, so obviously you have more control over this if you're the one providing the feedback, but if you're not, then you can say, look, I'd really appreciate it if we could move this to, a neutral office space, right? Or let's go grab a cup of coffee and talk about, Q1 discoveries and insights. That would really make a, level playing field, in other words. So for a business communication example, you can think of a situation something like this. So let's say the scenario is a project debrief meeting. So after, you've completed a project, you and your team, you are running through, you're doing the postmortem and you're thinking about, okay, what went well, what could have gone differently, and such. So a phrase you might use are, any thoughts on the strategy presentation? Right. I know Carolina was putting together a strategy presentation, so that might be relevant here, right? So any thoughts on, the outcome of the project? And then look for examples, right? So if you are heading the project or your manager, look for, moments where the feedback was, you can provide feedback. Moments where there are teachable opportunities and moments to shine, right? And then ultimately, how can this information that we learned improve future outcomes? So for example, if it's a project debrief meeting or you're doing a postmortem, you're looking at, what went well, what could have gone differently. How can this feedback that you get and that you seek from your teammates and the key stakeholders, how can it impact future presentations? Okay, now with a social fluency example and your casual conversation, you might be at a networking event or you might be at a casual gathering. So that's a very plausible situation, right? So when were you most engaged in our conversation, right? You might not necessarily say that to somebody, but this might be feedback you give to yourself. Like, when was I most, interested in what that person had to say? When was I most active listening? When was I most engaged in my body language? Okay. So really, again, you don't necessarily voice this phrase, but this is a phrase that you would have in your inner monologue, right? We talk a lot about self-talk. So this might be something that you ask, right? For your own feedback. And again, this ties into the intrapersonal communication. And then, for example, you might notice that I was most engaged when my interlocutor or the person I was talking to, my friend, for example, was asking me follow-up questions, right? Or I was asking them follow-up questions. That's when I felt most engaged. And then you'll notice that the outcome is that you have more confidence in that social situation. You have increased rapport with the person. You feel more at ease in social settings. You increase your social fluency. Now, we touched briefly on seeing feedback as a tool to uncover our blind spots, right? So in other words, things that we don't even realize that other people take note on and share insights about with us. Okay, this is super helpful. Okay, so even if it's feedback you don't really like and you're upset about, take a moment, distance yourself from that feedback, shake it from your identity, meaning say, this is not about me, this is about something I said or something I did or a behavior I've exhibited, and see it that way, right? So, okay, was there a moment where I exhibited this behavior? Was there a moment where my tone wasn't as good? Was there a moment where, my active listening wasn't that strong? Okay, so ask yourself, is there any truth in this feedback, right? So for example, let's say somebody says, your tone was completely uncalled for. It was outrageous, right? Let's say that's the feedback you got. Don't think of it that way. Think of it as, okay, was there actually a moment where my tone was not great? Was there a moment where it was off? Okay. And then reflect on that. Say, okay, well, in what situation did this happen? Was it multiple times? Was it just once? Is this a recurring theme? Are there patterns of this kind of behavior here? What is the situation? Okay. And then think of finding some concrete examples like, okay, well, if my tone is off, maybe that means my body language could be stronger. Maybe that means my pacing could be better. Maybe that means, right, in other words, maybe it's emblematic of something else, not tone necessarily. Maybe it's about mindset. Maybe it's about, you didn't get your workout in, so you feel really upset about that and you were short-tempered with someone. So you need to uncover the root cause, because what the person giving you the feedback is not going to do, they're not going to know why that behavior happened. They're not going to know why that communication was like that. Only you will know. And only you will know if you sit down with yourself and think about that. Like, why did that happen? Don't just be on autopilot and run through your day and communicate just willy-nilly, right? In a reactive sense. Be mindful about it, right? I was listening to a meditation the other day, and the meditation said something like, you're meditating constantly. Every opportunity in the day is a meditation, right? It's not just when you sit down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and think, let me meditate now. No, you can be meditating all day in all your activities. What does that mean? It means being mindful. It means understanding what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you're saying. How are you living, in other words? How are you communicating? Okay. And then ultimately, you want to create a focused action plan. So you want to say, okay, well, this kind of feedback is going to help me do X, Y, Z. Okay. So take that feedback and come up with an action plan. So 3 steps, 1 step, 2 steps. It doesn't matter. Just start with 1 step. In fact, the challenge I'm going to give you this week is to just uncover 1 step. Start with that. Don't overwhelm your system with multiple steps. So how do we turn the feedback into steps? Well, we've got to do 3 things. First, we listen without judgment, right? Listen to the feedback without judging yourself, without judging others, without taking it personally. That's very difficult to do, I know, but it's so important. So important. Then you want to look for some themes. Okay, so this person said my tone was off. That person also mentioned my tone. And then guess what? That a third person also mentioned my tone. Now it's up to you to discover the patterns. Like, when did this happen? Why was my tone off? Was it always with that same person? Was it always in this kind of situation, like in meetings or at a barbecue for some reason? Was it at, a certain event? Was it in a certain communication event or speech act? And then what can you do to improve? What is 1 step? Just 1, not 10, not 5, not even 3, just 1. Okay, so that brings me to the challenge. Ask an explearning member or a mentor or a friend or a family member or any trusted person for to point out an area of an improvement. Okay, and we'll make it about communication. Communication is broad, right? We've got nonverbal, verbal, paralinguistics, right? We have so many things to choose from with our communication. Where can I improve by communication? It could also be certain settings, like what do you think I should do in, a networking situation, or at a meeting, or when I'm, running an interview, even if you're someone who interviews. And then what is one step? Now, the reason we're looking at asking for feedback is because there is vulnerability in that. Okay. That vulnerability helps us get closer to our goals, because we're shedding all, any sense of perfection, or any sense of like, I need to do this in the most excellent, perfect way. We're shedding all of that and saying, look, I'm showing up as my real, true, authentic, raw self. And I'm asking you for feedback, right? And then you, in turn, provide feedback to that person. So that's the challenge, okay, for this week. So I want us to talk about these questions, okay? When one of you talks, I want the other person to jump in, okay? As if, we're having a conversation. So the first thing I want you to think about is, how has feedback influenced your own communication style? And again, this could be feedback that you get that is obvious feedback, where someone says, oh, look, Jimmy, I think your tone was off, or I think your body language was not strong enough. But it could also be more likely be that it's undetected, that it's covert, that it's, oh, this person checked out when I was talking. Why is that? Or this person seemed, really upset when they were talking, or this person, whatever, right? Seeing certain feedback that you uncover. Okay, so let's have a chat now.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, take a moment, collect your thoughts. We can even start with thinking about what's some feedback you've gotten before. Could be, for a presentation. It could be for your communication specifically. It could be really anything. Think about what is feedback. Yeah, feel free to jump in. All right. So hopefully you got some good thoughts out. You shared great feedback with each other. I always want us to have this growth mindset approach when it comes to feedback. That's going to be a superpower of yours. And then I really want to see people doing this challenge. Okay, so I have a post in the community, and you'll see where it says the follow-up activity from today's session. Okay, that's where I want you to post this under. Let's see, is it live now? There it is. Okay, so it's up. That's where I want you to post. Okay, my friends? So excellent job. And take this feedback into consideration, and I'll see you in the next one, okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mary.
You're welcome.
You
Excellent job.
inspired me so much.
What's that?
You inspired me so much, Mary.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That's so sweet of you. Well, likewise. You're all so amazing, and you're doing a really great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jasper. Bye.
Thank you, Bye.
Bye, guys.